Perfect. So hello everyone, welcome to our Object Matrix Fortium webinar regarding the top tips for avoid your data being held to ransom. My name is Mark Cabberfield, and on the call we also have Jonathan Morgan from Object Matrix and Michael Nixon from Fortium.
Hi.
This is being recorded, so just to let everyone know, but you can still ask questions at any time, either through the chat or feel free to just unmute yourselves and interrupt us. It's a fairly informal chat, so we're just going to work it through as we can. Today we're going to do a quick intro to the companies and to our main products, a quick insight into our integration, and then mainly, the reason we're here today, talk about security breaches, keeping your data secure, and our top tips. So I'll do the introduction to Object Matrix, Michael will introduce Fortium, and then Michael and John can do the talking about the main thing. So company introduction first. Who are Object Matrix? Well, Object Matrix are a Welsh company, and Fortium are a Welsh company just down the road from us. So both of us specialising in the media industry. Obviously, we've had very close ties since the outset. Object Matrix is a software company focused on the media industry since 2003. And the founders have been building object storage systems for a long time, since 2000 onwards. So they've been making sure that they have a really, really secure platform out there. We concentrate on the media workflows and the media industry because it's just the challenges our main customers face, and we help them become more operationally efficient. It also ensures that their creatives can carry on doing the creative thing that they need to do out there. So we're empowering that creativity for them. The main product is Matrix Store. It's an object storage, quite often referred to as the Object Matrix. So not quite sure why we have a brand name, but it is there. But Matrix Store is a media-focused private and hybrid cloud. It's a very mature object storage system. It's been around for quite a while, and it's been built with input from our customers. Our customers drive us to produce the object storage that they really, really need and the platform that they need for their revenue generation, and to know that they've got a safe and reliable storage. They can keep working with various disaster recovery and business continuity plans. They've got remote working, and they've also got a long future-proof system, a system that can keep working over 10 years in various companies with seamless migration and uptime throughout the entire time. It allows quite a lot of remote working, as I said, and the deployment side of things helps you with that. The system is broken up into various vaults or buckets or workspaces, and those can be set up so that they can go to various sites in full disaster recovery, business continuity. I said the words public cloud, private cloud earlier, and that's because we can have it in a local site, in a data center, or even using our own Matrix Store cloud where we present it as a service. Matrix Store is fully S3 compatible, so it fills into many, many workflows, but we've also got our own suite of tools that allow any creatives to be able to get to that data in a non-proprietary format. And that non-proprietary is quite important to make sure people have access to the data and the metadata, because that allows people to migrate to us and from us should they need to. We can keep multiple copies over multiple sites. And we've got the built-in smarts as well, the built-in intelligence in the storage. That's the thing that making sure the security, the digital content governance, and the compliance rules are all there, making sure the data is only accessible and only available to the people who need it, but also available to the people who need it. There's no blockers to the people who have access getting to it. Also that metadata as well, the built-in intelligence with metadata, allowing people to access that metadata, use that metadata, and search that metadata in a full Matrix Store automated system. Where is it deployed? Well, there's various ways you can deploy a Matrix Store. I'd say most of our customers, 90% of our customers, started off with just the on-premise, a local cloud, giving them access to their data locally, quickly, fast object storage while keeping the right number of copies and the right amount of access. found quite a lot of our customers have started having a remote location as well, not just for disaster recovery, but for also business continuity, the ability to pick up should they need to, and even just sites collaborating as well. Some of our customers are now deployed into 15 various bureaus around the world, which has allowed them to collaborate on a really global scale, using their Matrix stores to seamlessly collaborate between them. We've also got links up to the public cloud as well, making sure your Matrix store data can also be pushed out to public clouds such as AWS, Azure. We've got the copy, but unlike other systems, that sometimes when you put things into public cloud, you have to bring it back with those systems. With us, we put it in as we see it. If it's your data, you get it. And we even put that metadata next to it in sidecar files to make sure that you have access to your non-proprietary data. The last one and the most recent one is the Matrix Store Cloud deployment. That's available in the UK and South Africa at this moment in time. And we're trying to deploy that out to further places in Europe, in France and Belgium shortly, and hopefully down into Chile and US as well. And that gives people the ability to have all the benefits of Matrix Store with their own direct pipe to that Matrix Store, but then all the benefits of remote working, as well as the complete flexibility to use their data. There's no egress costs involved, so they can pull and push that data as much as they like. They want to apply some AI tools to it and scan that data for a particular AI algorithm. They can do that as many times as they like without the fear of scanning and egress costs and charges just for looking at their own data. So fully deployable in various locations as well as workflows. We've got the obligatory customer slide, and on there you'll see quite a lot of post houses, news companies, film companies, ad agencies, but you'll also see in there a few banks, Deutsche Bank and RBS and Schroders, as well as a couple of parliaments. Now, they chose Matrix Store for our security credentials, you know, the history that we've had with security and the ability to lock that data for set amounts of time, and the compliance. It all comes down to the Matrix Store's ability to look after the needs, the higher security needs of the banking industry and their workflows. We even had one customer who's not listed there who a few years back had the fairly famous hack, alleged hack from a North Korea area. And the Matrix Store was one of the very few tools within their system that was not touched at all. We think they didn't even know it was there. We passed the security audits afterwards and the reviews, and they brought the Matrix Store back online afterwards, and everything was exactly as they had left it. So it's one of those security credentials that really brings home how secure the Matrix Store is. I think that's it for my slide. So I'll pass over to Michael now just to give you a little bit of an overview of Fortium.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Nixon. I'm from Fortium, and I'm the Marketing and Engagement Manager. As Mark's already said, you know, we're a Welsh company as well. We're based about 20 miles away from them, and we're very much focused in the media and entertainment industry too. We create security software for those specialist workflows within media and entertainment. We like to think our products are seamless, they're simple to use, and they're world class at what they do. We're mainly focused on different encryption products that we'll touch on shortly. And you know, one of our focuses is that we won't hamper the workflows that, you know, the creatives within this industry rely on. And we've been doing that for quite a while now. We've been doing it for almost 2 decades. And these workflows, you know, one of the things that we focus on within Fortium is working very closely with our customers. Similar to Object Matrix, we want to make sure that everyone can work in the same way that they usually do. Usually there's a trade-off between usability and security. And there sometimes is, but we try and focus, if it isn't usable, then it's not going to be used. So we make sure that both those priorities are allied as closely as they can be. And one of the things we do to make sure that it's quite seamless to integrate our products. So a lot of the time we don't place limitations on what tools that the end users might be wanting to use. We don't hamper any of the systems in any ways. They can be sometimes a lot of pushback on certain encryption and security tools because people seem to think it would slow down their machines. But yeah, our software doesn't do that whatsoever. If we can go on to the next slide, Mark, we can talk a little bit about our pedigree within security.
Sure.
Yeah, so just a quick example of this. We've got a good reputation within media and entertainment, especially within Hollywood. And, you know, several years ago now, we were set a challenge by NBC Universal to come up with a security solution for them, which involved, securing their post-production workflows, their environments, which had several hundred different users during sound editing, because they thought there was a security hole there that needed fixing. And one of the things that we had to ensure that this security tool did was that it prevented unauthorized access to any sensitive files, specifically, pre-release files, because they're obviously more valuable to hackers if they get out there. We needed to make sure that end users were able to keep working as best they could. Again, they couldn't be hampered by the security that was being used. The security tool had to be simple to use, so it couldn't hamper the way that they work. We didn't want any of the creatives to choose not to use this security tool, so it had to be simple. And we had to come up with something that had audit capabilities for them as well. So I'm pretty sure this will come up later on in the presentation. It's very important that you can look at what is happening to a file if someone is actually using it in the way that they're intended to do so. So out of that agreement with NBC Universal came a product called Mediaseal. If you want to go to the next slide, Mark. So Mediaseal was something that we came up with NBC Universal. It was built entirely by Fortium in South Wales after a few years of very hard work and stuff that was very complicated and far beyond my understanding at that time. It keeps media files encrypted at rest and in use throughout the workflow. And as far as we're aware, it's completely unique in what it does. So even if a file is being accessed on one machine, if another user wants to try and access it and they don't have the correct authentication factors, they can't access that file. Regardless, it's always, it's encryption in use, we deem it. And that access is controlled by multi-factor authentication. So the 3 factors of authentication that we use is there'll be a password that's associated with a file. There'll also be a physical key. So we use iLocks for Mediaseal at this moment in time. And there will also be a server authentication. And that server authentication looks to see if a specific user is on an access control list. So those factors all in combination with each other mean that files are always secure, and you can always make sure the right person is accessing a file when they need to. Because of those factors of authentication, it does defend sensitive files from both internal and external threats. So if you have a lost laptop, if you send a file to the wrong person, there's no danger of that file getting out and being leaked before an intended TV or film release. It works across any media file and on Mac and Windows as well. So this is part of us not limiting the creatives that do work within post-production. So if you want to use Mac, if you want to use Windows, you can. And because it does work on any media file, so if you're working on MP4s, DPX sequences, again, it doesn't matter. You can use the same encryption technology for any specific workflow within media and entertainment. Again, it isn't locked to a specific editing program, so there's no limitations placed on those end users. And we also test, quite a lot, so it doesn't slow down machines either. And we track the file usage. So, as we said before, it's really important to track what is happening to a file. We can see if a file has been accessed successfully by a user. We can see if file access has been denied for whatever reason. It allows you to see if the file's been saved out or exported in some way. And all that information is recorded in Mediaseal. One thing that you can also do is you can revoke file access as well. So if you have set a specific studio up with Mediaseal, and you've sent them files already, they're downloaded to their machines, you can actually revoke access to it as well if they've had to be moved on from a project or similar. So yeah, that's all about Mediaseal. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, great. No, that's really interesting. I think I didn't even know about the encryption in use side of things. So I'll be updating my knowledge bank there. So how do they work together? Well, as you know, Matrix Store has many access points, whether that's through our Vision portal or through a Samba interface or our S3 interface. Basically, as you know, the Fortium Mediaseal encrypts the assets as they are created or while they're being created, and while they're saved to the Matrix Store, they're obviously encrypted. So if someone did get past the Matrix Store user and password requirements, or they did have access to a vault they shouldn't have had access to for some reason, of course, those users aren't going to be able to read those assets. They haven't got the Mediaseal keys required to access the clips. So again, you've got that insurance that on shared storages or in your shared private cloud, not only do you know where the asset is, you now know who's able to open it, even if they did accidentally have access to it in some way. And again, we've got the full audits within the Mediaseal side of things, but again, full audits within Matrix Store as well as those analytics to make sure you can see the assets as they're being used, as well as the entire storage architecture and overview. So I'll hand over to John now to tell us a little bit about security in Matrix Store.
Yeah, thank you, Mark and Michael. Just a big welcome to everyone who came today from myself, because I just think security is so incredibly important. And just to start off from a higher level before we dive into the security in Matrix Store, it's becoming more important, right? I mean, I just read a Gartner report today that said that they believe 95% of organizations will be affected in some way by ransomware. And they're talking about larger organizations, but still it applies to all of us. And this whole security thing used to be a kind of it happens over there thing. But nowadays, we have to plan for it, right? It's not a case of will it happen to us? It's a case of when will this happen to us? When will we be attacked, right? And if you add that to the fact that in days gone by, we used to put all of our archive on tape and on disparate systems, you know, that was kind of a protection in some ways. But we can't afford to do that now anymore, right? We have to have all of our data available all of the time for everybody. That's what kind of people are asking for, right? It's gone are the days that we can just hide data away under a sofa. So everything's available. And therefore, a ransomware attack can massively affect your company, the companies you deliver systems for. And unless you have systems like that from Fortium that have integrated automated workflows that protect your data, and unless you have systems like object matrices, and we'll talk about some of the security things here, that will automate the protection of the data, then there's a big problem. You know, you're just asking for trouble down the line. So yes, many organizations have huge problems with access rights. And that is one of the main things that is a challenge when you talk about security. Access rights, because everybody wants access to everything all of the time. So do you have a gatekeeper? Rights management. I mean, the cloud is not a solution for this, right? Rights management in the cloud might mean I need to let a third-party application run processes on my archive. Well, what if that third-party application is compromised? What access rights do I give? You know, you've actually gone outside of the firewall that we have all naturally had on premises for many years and are opening up to a whole new set of challenges there. And security credentials end up becoming a problem, managing them. One customer we spoke to, a VOD customer, said DevOps is a major cost problem because of all of the rights management that we have to do within that, both from a security credential point of view and also from a who is allowed to access what where. So actually within Matrix Store, what we have is a system that builds in many automated processes, works with your Active Directory, as we'll have a look at soon, and enables a lot of these things to be automated, especially when we work with partners like Fortium. Can I go to the next slide, please? We've got a couple of questions coming in about Fortium, so we'll jump onto those when we just get through this slide. So on this slide, we're just talking about this growing threat from security problems. Is the problem coming from as reputedly happened, a disgruntled employee who publishes a password on the internet? Is the problem coming from non-automatically updated keys? Is the problem coming from one PC with far too much access getting compromised and then running a ransomware? And this happened to one of our customers just 2 months ago. They had a SAN environment. They had a temporary editor come in. Their PC got compromised, and then the whole SAN environment got compromised because that one machine got compromised. Michael, do you want to talk about the statistics on this slide?
Yeah, I just thought it's quite interesting talking about the third one, which is $4.41 million. Breaches due to cloud misconfigurations resulted in the average cost of a breach increasing. I think that's interesting because, especially during the last 6 months, I presume a lot more people have been working from home and have been remote working as well. So they've been looking at different cloud solutions that can facilitate that, whether it's Matrix Store or something different even. So the cloud's been good to enable end users to keep working throughout this period. And it's also almost like a little bit of catch up that needs to be done when you're thinking about security now, because there is, you've put yourself more at risk because of that. And, one of the other stats in the same IBM report says that remote working can increase the cost of a data breach by, $137,000 as well, because there's a lot more opportunities for a threat actor to work against you. And again, that's just because of the change of the landscape over the last year or so. And there's always almost like a seesaw between security and usability. And I think it is a case that when people are talking about uploading to the cloud, it works great in theory, but ultimately you need to be starting to think about how to secure that as well, because it doesn't solve any security issues for you necessarily, unless it is configured properly, as as John already said previously. So yeah, there's a lot of different threats out there just because of the crisis that we're in. And that's also illustrated by the World Health Organization. They've had a 5-fold increase in cyber attacks in the last 6 months, which is remarkable, really. And I'm sure everyone's also aware too that there's a lot more like scams and phishing emails out there now as well, which allude to, can you make sure you've got a COVID test and things like that as well. So hackers move extremely fast to try and exploit any opportunities that are there. It's up to us, as companies that create these tools and also companies that use these tools as well, to be proactive and one step ahead of them where we can be. So yeah.
Hey Michael, if you hit the chat button at the top of your screen, there's a couple of questions come in. So Caesar, asked a question, and he said, Mediaseal is encrypting every file inside of the vault, and there is a Mediaseal agent on the client machine to decrypt. Is that correct?
So it depends on how you set up Mediaseal, to be honest with you. So you would always have if you need to access Mediaseal encrypted files, you would need the Mediaseal software on your workstation, and then you could you'll be asked factors of authentication to prove you are who you say you are to access a file. So the way the tracking tool works is that if you're using server authentication as one of your factors of authentication, when you try to access that Mediaseal file, it'll ping our server to say, and that server is unique to that encryptor. So there's no details aren't shared between customers, for instance. It'll ping that server to say, okay, is this user actually allowed to access this file, yes or no? If it says no, they'll get an access denied screen straight away. They won't even be prompted for a password. If they are allowed access, then they'll then be asked to provide a password to access said file. If you want to lock access, so an encrypted user can go into the access control list for any file that's generated, and then take off file access if that server authentication is enabled. So yeah, that's how it works basically.
And the second part of that question is, how does the tracking tool work to lock access if the user privileges have been revoked?
So yeah, if the user access has been revoked, it monitors the file. Our server does. So if you are trying to access the file and you just get a pop-up saying access denied, the user that has encrypted the file, the administrator, will be able to say, okay, there's a lot of access denied messages. You can actually set up within Mediaseal notifications for the administrator. So if there is a lot of access denied happening, you can be notified via email to say, okay, something's gone wrong here. Someone is repeatedly accessing the file when they don't have access because you've already revoked it. That could also be, that could be a usability issue as well. There could be someone who has been sent that file in good faith and they're supposed to be doing work on that file. So then the administrator can verify that and actually give access back to that user if they need to as well. They don't need to generate a new file if they're using server authentication as one of the factors of authentication. You can switch it on and off as you need.
Great. And Augustine asked, how is Fortium deployed against Matrix Store? There are several options, but one of the options is you run it on the client side. And basically on the client side, it's encrypting, decrypting while it's sending to Matrix Store, getting back from Matrix Store. It's presenting a file system interface for the user to use. And you're able to basically pass keys to individuals who are allowed to access their part of Matrix Store. Hopefully that sums it up in a suitably technical level. Great, so this slide, I'll go through my side. So somebody is saying, right, I know I need to store an archive. I know I need to store a library. But what is it about Matrix Store that it is giving me more than if I just used a big fat file system, or if I used AN, the object storage solution that perhaps doesn't have all of the features that is inside of Matrix Store? So of course we're doing the basics. We're integrating with your LDAP, which enables you to control your user base from there if you want to, or you can just keep users within Matrix Store if you don't have a LDAP environment. Every single access to Matrix Store is with security credentials. So behind the scenes, even if you're going via a file system interface that we present to you, actually there is a secure lock that is going between the file system and the Matrix Store, and ensuring that user is fully authenticated. There is no other way to read the data except for through security credentialed access to and from Matrix Store. There are no file system options. So obviously where you're using Mediaseal, you can use that to extra protect your file system access. But actually, if you have a big fat SAN, as I was talking about with the other example of our customer who had a big SAN, one machine got compromised. It had write access to the entire archive on that SAN. And in a very short amount of time, it didn't have to update and encrypt every single byte on that archive. It just had to encrypt enough of the blocks on that SAN in order to lock out the user from being able to read their files. It's a big problem, right? I mean, it's a really easy way to do ransomware against a very large system. And that happened to be a random attack. It wasn't an orchestrated, targeted attack. Now, if you are the BBC, if you're a Sky, if you're a very large organization, you are going to have people targeting your organization. This was just one of those random malware drop-in attacks that actually really messed up their entire data sets. So by having non-file system type areas in your archive, actually, probably 90% of attacks are just defended against if you want to keep some of your data in those areas. And where you don't, use Mediaseal. We audit everything, so everything can be seen, what's happening. You can pick up if something odd is occurring. We'll talk a bit more about that coming up in the future. Because typically we deliver the solution on an appliance type architecture, we control the firewall on that appliance really, really strongly. And one of the things we do is we remove everything from the operating system that you don't need for Matrix Store. Immediately that removes a lot of security problems that you can have otherwise. And we tightly build a firewall around the storage and only allow the ports that access our data through the credentialed access. So we have a really, really strong level of security there. We have compliance features. We can encrypt traffic. We'll go over no single points of failure in a second. And we'll also have a look at the trash can in that context in a second. Over to you, Michael.
Hi, yeah. So with Mediaseal, as I say, it's encryption at rest, in motion, and in use. So that means if the files are sitting on any server, wherever, on a local machine, they're encrypted at rest. They're encrypted in motion. So if you are sending them by whatever file transfer system that you're used to, they stay encrypted during that as well. Obviously, you have end-to-end encryption as well that already exist or should already exist for anything you are sending to people. But even if you are uploading a file to, say, Dropbox or Google Drive, Mediaseal keeps encryption there. It's just what it does on that file. And encryption use, again, if you're editing any files, is kept there and is kept secure. As we touched upon before, you can't access the file without meeting any factors of authentication. So that could be a case of if you need a password. It could be you need your physical iLock key or a physical USB key to signify it is you accessing the file. And you'll need that server authentication because we have a dynamic access control list as well, which again is very powerful. If there is a project that is going on that you're working on a new theatrical release, the people involved in that project can change at a very short notice. If you've already sent files to someone and they're not working on it anymore, you want to revoke access for those people, for those individuals, because you want to control your files as best you can. So there's as little chance as possible of any data or media breach happening. That ties into as well something that Mediaseal does, so you can sunrise and sunset access to files. So I can say that, I know this person only works 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday. I can time lock that file. So if someone does gain access to their server, on a weekend, which does happen more often than not, a hacker that's making a targeted attack will try and go at times when they know no one's in their office to try and monitor anything. That file can be completely locked down, so no one's accessing it during those times. The security is transparent. Again, it can be used on any file type, Mac or Windows, and you've got file audits as well. We can tell you if a file has been accessed, if this file has been denied access for any reason. Again, that ties into, I guess, empowering the administrator a bit more to say, okay, if someone is being denied access, either that file's gone somewhere where it shouldn't and someone's trying to have a look at it when they're not allowed, or it could be, a simple case of they thought they were working on this project, they're supposed to be working on this project, they need to be added to the user list as quickly as possible, so then we can hit a deadline that we have to. So yeah, and that's me done.
Great. Well, we build this webinar as top tips to avoid your data from being held ransom. And we have 10 minutes left here. So very quickly, we're going to go through our tips for how to keep the data safely. So let's fire through them.
Yeah, so I think it's quite important to realize that you're using the correct technology to control content. So if we're looking at, in particular, if we're looking at ransom, and so if you do not want your data to be held to ransom, you need to choose a solution that prevents that. So what I mean is there could be a case that you have specific content that's lying on your service that has a lot more value to a hacker than something else. And this would be especially true in media or entertainment if you're working on pre-release content. So something that's been made for a TV or film show, that might be being worked on for a very important client. That content is extremely important if it gets released. So if a theatrical release leaks out unintentionally before it hits the box office, 19.1% of revenue is lost on average. So that can be, several $1 million, hundreds of millions of dollars even.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's not insignificant amounts of money. We've been, over the recent years, there hasn't really been a huge story like that. I guess you could say one reason is that content owners use the correct technology now to protect their files. Okay, just to give a more specific example to Fortium, so we do a lot of work within localization. So that involves media files being sent to, about 30 or 40 different countries across the world for a theatrical release that's due out in, say, 3 months' time. So that's the film being translated into French, Spanish, Chinese, Mandarin, Japanese, as many languages as they can, because they want to hit day and date release across the world. That means you're sending files to third parties where you don't have any control over their network settings at all. So if you're thinking about what technology to use to control that, you want to use something that controls those files as strictly as possible. And that's why Mediaseal is used in this scenario, basically, because you can turn off that file access if you want to. And they have multi-factor authentication, so you can ensure there's only, say, 4 people from a Japanese office working on that project. So the other 10, 20 people who are in that same office aren't going to accidentally end up downloading that file and taking it home with them to watch before they're supposed to. And so that's why it's used in that scenario. So yeah, it's important to cover as many areas as you can. Yeah, if you want to carry on, John.
Yeah, I apologize, this isn't very technical, but no single point of failure rule applies big time to security. I know it's kind of regurgitating something, in another context. It used to be talked about keep your data in 2 locations, but it goes for security keys. It goes for, does the same person have access to everything? Can they get to the same material in both archive locations if there are 2 archive locations, or can the same machine get access to both copies of the data? You can apply no single points of failure throughout the end-to-end journey of your data and your people who access the data and the clients that access the data. And if at any point there's a single point of failure in any of that, you probably want to look at whether that's an acceptable risk you want to take.
Yeah, so tip 3 is that it sounds very self-explanatory, really. If you don't recognize something, then you shouldn't be using it. If there's a file, if there's a folder, if there's a USB key that's lying around the office, if you've got no reason to access it, then don't bother. The same for any emails that come in that you don't recognize. Again, because of the current situation we're in with the coronavirus, there are a lot of emails around that'll say something like, oh, open this attachment to find out how you can be tested and things like that, which obviously you shouldn't really do unless you've got a reason to open that file or it's from someone that you recognize. Then you've got no reason to go near it. However, you can also take it a step further. Sometimes you will get an email from someone that you do recognize, but is quite out of character, because it'll ask you for, say, like a payment of an invoice, or it'll have an attachment to it that isn't legitimate. So this actually happened a few months ago now for a company that we work with. Their email systems got breached, and they sent us, I think it was an invoice, which was completely out of character from the CEO, which is odd because obviously they're a customer of ours, so they wouldn't be sending us one. So if something is out of character like that, it's always good to ring up the person that is sending you something, saying, is this legitimate or not? In that case, we were actually able to, help them lock down their systems again, which was quite nice. Same story for any USB keys as well. So there's an old story I think in 2008, where a NATO building in Kabul got infiltrated by Russian hackers because they basically left some USB keys in one of the local hardware stores to that headquarters, and they went out and bought the USB keys, took them back to the headquarters, and it gave Russian spies an into that little network that they weren't supposed to. That's a very extreme case, so it isn't going to happen most likely, but it is just an example of USB keys can be very powerful to hackers. That's why you can get software that blocks USB ports now on your machines, which is quite useful. We've got them in Fortium, so if I need to use USB for whatever reason, I need to register it with the security manager here. And likewise, he gets notifications if I do try and plug a USB key into my machine. So again, that comes down to, that sort of leads on to the next point as well, which is about having audits and permissions and analytics as well that people can work with. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So with Object Matrix, we've over the last years, we've put a lot of effort into building up that analytics trail around the storage, and building a system that can be either standalone, and you can do analytics with Sense, with Matrix, or you can do that with other third-party analytics platforms as well, and you can send the information there. But one of the key strategies that people have against security problems is that basically they are watching the whole time, generating alerts if something unusual is happening, and having the platform, having the storage platform, the tools such as Mediaseal that can allow you to monitor what's happening from a control interface is a key part of the software infrastructure you need when you're planning out post-production or broadcast facilities these days.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, generally like 81% of security breaches are due to weak or stolen passwords. So it's a good idea to change them if they're not very good. You can check that online. There's a website called haveibeenpwned.com, and you can literally type in a password and it'll tell you if it's been leaked online at any stage whatsoever. So then that gives you a good incentive to change it. You should also consider using a password manager as well. If you're managing loads of different passwords for your machine, you can then, it'll basically randomize any passwords that you do set. So if there is a data breach which is completely out of your control because of a software vendor that you use, or a system or social network or something like that, you're using a unique password for every login. On average, people have 27 different user accounts, and which obviously have 27, they have to log into 27 different systems. You're not going to remember 27 different unique strong passwords yourself. So there's technology out there that can help you do that. They work on a zero knowledge basis as well, so they're not insecure by any means at all. And if you are working, so we have different password managers set up within Fortium, and if you are using them for your company, you can have a security manager then that can they can see what systems you are logging into. They won't have visibility for the passwords, but then they can also switch off access. So if an employee does go rogue for whatever reason, they can actually say, well, I'm not allowing you the access to this, 100 different user logins for our own servers that you did have access for. Any more things like that. This password managers can be really strong, and it's probably the quickest and easiest thing that you can do to secure yourself against anyone trying to break into any of your systems. So that's it from me.
Yeah, and finally from me, we were by the way asked to pick our top 3 tips. Obviously, these are not supposed to represent all of the things you can do to make your systems secure, but they are our top 3 tips each. And my final tip is digital content governance. And really by this, I mean automated workflows that build in security. You cannot rely on the individual to do the right thing at the right time. You have to predetermine, if you like, workflows that will ensure security protocols are kept to. So things that we do are things like locking down data, being able to audit, and things around the security credentials, who can access what. But regardless of that, security needs to be thought of up front, and it needs to be planned, strategized on, automated, and delivered in a manner that allows people to perform their day-to-day workloads in a good way. I think we have a summary slide of our top 6 tips. So just to go through them quickly: using the correct technology to control content, applying no single point of failure rule to security. If you don't recognize a file, folder, or USB, absolutely do not open it or use it. Using analytics and alerts to spot problems as they're happening. Upgrading your passwords on a regular basis, and automated workflows, digital content governance.
Great. Thank you very much for that, guys. Obviously, if you've got any questions, now's the time to unmute yourselves and ask them. We've gone a little bit over time, only 5 minutes, but if you're welcome to stay on and chat to us. And just wanted to say thank you very much for everyone who joined us today.
Thank you for inviting me as well.
Yeah. Guys, if anyone wants a demo of Fortium working with Matrix Store, obviously just drop a message and we'll get that demo set up for you.
Great stuff. Okay, well, thank you very much all. I will cease recording, and thank you very much.